All right. Well, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us here for another edition of our Moving Beyond the Coronavirus Economy series. My name is Tom DuFore. I'm the founder and CEO of Big Sky Franchise Team. And today's session is all about what's been happening in macro and microeconomic trends for small business, franchising, and some of the broad economic indicators that you can start to apply on your franchise marketing and franchise sales efforts and be thinking about it. If you're new to us and this is your first time tuning in, every month, I should say, for the last almost 2 years, I believe it's been, we have been doing a review of economic indicators and how that may impact your franchise candidates' thought processes and decisions, and things for you to be thinking about for your own franchise marketing and franchise sales efforts. And oftentimes it's just how you are communicating with your franchisees. So if you're new, thanks for being here. We're glad you're here. If you're a repeat guest, thanks for tuning in again and for not getting bored to tears and wanting to participate in this. One housekeeping item that I would make mention of here is, if you have not done so already, please go ahead and subscribe to our podcast called Multiply Your Success at any of your favorite podcast services, whether it's Spotify, iTunes, or any of the others out there, Pocket Cast, etc. We'd love to have you subscribe and tune in. Again, that's Multiply Your Success. This will be rapid fire. Looks like we've got a full house of folks with us today. I will share my screen. We'll go ahead and jump into this, and we'll start going through each of these one at a time here. So I will go ahead and share my screen. By the way, if you do have questions throughout, please feel free to type it into the chat box. I will do my best to answer it. Today, I'm doing this solo, so it may take me a moment to do it, but we are live and doing this. All right. So as we begin, one of my favorite charts is to always start with the PMI, or Purchasing Managers Index report that's put out by the Institute for Supply Management. And I love this report because this provides us with a leading indicator of what might be happening or trends that we can see coming down the pipeline here. So what we can see here is this is their report that came out for July, and it says the U.S. manufacturing sector grew in July as the manufacturing PMI registered 52.8%, 0.2 percentage point lower than the June reading of 53%. The manufacturing PMI continued to indicate sector expansion in U.S. economic growth in July. 3 of the 5 sub-indexes that directly factor into manufacturing PMI, which were in growth territory. And a reading above 50% indicates the manufacturing economy is generally expanding. Below 50% indicates that it is generally contracting. So what can we take from this? Well, why I like this and why it's a leading indicator is because this tends to tell us what manufacturers are doing, and manufacturers have such a significant impact on economic output and purchasing power and impact on the general broad economy. So we can see that it's slowly been declining here for about a year, and it hopefully it looks to maybe be stabling out here in the low 50th percentile. If we start dipping down to that 50th, right at 50 or starting to get below 50, we can see that there may be deeper contraction going on there. I'm hopeful that by fourth quarter, we start to see that tick up again and start moving up closer to or maintaining and then moving up to mid 50s. But what this says is, I think that kind of what we're seeing at the economy as a whole, we're kind of at this kind of flat point in economic growth. It's kind of flat right now. Some uncertainty may be factoring into it, which we will be talking about here shortly. So that's manufacturing PMI. Here is the services sector and services PMI, and that had a nice little uptick in the month of July. And so it says in July, services PMI registered 56.7%, a 1.4 percentage point increase compared to the June reading of 55.3%. The 12-month average is 60.2 2%, reflecting consistently strong growth to the services sector, which has expanded for 26 consecutive months. And a reading above 50% indicates the services sector economy is generally expanding. Below 50% indicates the services sector is generally contracting. So, as we are largely a services-driven economy, certainly seeing services continue to grow is a good sign as more and more companies are driving that. So, positive thing for us to be seeing for services sector that's happening. By the way, purchasing managers, certainly, if I jump back here, part of the influence for this very well could be the impact from uncertainty on what's going on for the broader economic impact from global wars and other the other economic conditions we'll be jumping into. And the last report I like to discuss is what we are. Chat is disabled. Oh, goodness. Let's see. The chat says PMI looks like economy is slowing down. Yeah, I would agree with you here. There's no doubt the economy is indicating that it's just not growing at as fast of a pace. And I think that as we look here for our where is it? For our GDP, and you can see that the last 2 quarters for the last 6 months, you see that it's slowed down. We've had contraction. So technically we're in a recession, albeit it looks fairly mild, but nonetheless in some form of recession. And I think what you'll see here is that the economic data is kind of mixed. So I agree with you on that. Let's see, Q&A is disabled, huh? All right, I'm not sure why that is. Maybe try the chat box, see if that's open. If for Q&A here, folks, sorry about that. So yeah, I would tend to agree with you there. There's no doubt it's showing that it's slowing down, but anything above this 50% it still is in a growth territory, just not as growing as quickly, which we can see through these other indicators. I'll jump back into hospital PMI. That's still in a growth territory at 54.9%. And it says economic activity in the hospital subsector grew in July for the 26th consecutive month, say the nation's hospital supply executives in the latest ISM report on business. The hospital PMI registered 54.9% in July, a 3.1 percentage decrease from the June reading of 58%. And so not terribly, I don't think surprising with the hospital segment. This is their newest report. It's relatively new within the last couple of years. And when with all of the government spending in COVID situations, whether that's been state and federal spending, you have these big peaks and valleys. And then as the coronavirus situation reduced and demand for some of these things started to reduce, we saw this huge drop off here from purchasing managers, maybe not buying as much or anticipating as significant of a demand, or they had over purchased inventory that they were using that we saw contract here in March, where it was basically right at that 50th percentile and then bounce up and, kind of in this mid 50 range. So, and I think a large part of that, and you can kind of see here this is from the Worldometer coronavirus. This is right now for just the United States at large. This is a 7-day rolling average for cases. And so you can see back in January, right, we had this huge spike in January of this past year where it seemed like everybody had coronavirus. Then it fell down and cases looked to have increased slightly here in July, and it's kind of on the way back down again. So while we did see a mild spike overall, you think of cases, testing, all the testing that we have, I think this is a positive sign for us to see these numbers as low as they are right now. And then the big thing certainly is the overall reduction in deaths. And you can see this as a whole. And, rolling average is now down to about 349 per day for a 7-day rolling or for a 7-day moving average there. So I'd say that's a positive thing, but I tie that back to PMI. I think you can see this surge in January here. And it kind of fell down, and you see this surge. You maybe see an over purchase where maybe they were waiting on supplies as we saw that drop. I'm not saying that's the only reason, certainly, but it just they seem to kind of fit together as you start looking at that. So I just think that's a positive thing for us to see these cases down. Next year we have inflation, and inflation certainly is going to be a huge driver, especially for impacting our manufacturing, impacting and forecast for purchasing. So purchasing managers index, if we bounce back to that to say, yeah, it has been declining. Consumer demand may be steady, it may be declining. Certainly, I think there was some pent-up demand in late 2020 into early 2021 from the lockdowns and shutdowns that occurred, where consumer spending really slowed and significantly. We saw a spike in demand, and now maybe we're seeing the kind of the settling down, and purchasing managers are trying to figure out, what's happening. You have consumer with inflation going, wild is probably an understatement, but certainly uncertain. I mean, you can see this is just a 1-year trend. 5.3% was still high a year ago. Now we're up to 8.5% for last month, 9.1. Here's the 5-year trend, just to show a spike, a 10-year trend. Here's a 25-year trend. And this is, by the way, from tradingeconomics.com, United States inflation CPI report that they put out. So this is the all-time, and you can see these huge spikes. So here we are all the way on the far right of this screen, approaching 10% for this big spike here in the 2020s. And you can go back to the 80s where we saw that last, into the late 70s here where we have a big spike, into the early 80s, and then things kind of calming down back around 5 and slowly going down. Here's the Great Recession spike where it peaked up at about 5% and then went negative shortly thereafter with the real estate bust that happened there. And you can see dating all the way back to the 40s and 50s as well, with these big spikes that occurred in inflationary times. So certainly problematic. As the old adage goes, what goes up must eventually come back down at some point in time. So hopefully we start seeing that sooner rather than later. Now, how does this impact with your franchisees, and what does that mean for franchise sales and marketing? Well, this is something that I think is it's just a reminder to, especially if you're in a fixed location franchise where you have any sort of leasehold improvements that are occurred, or the need to purchase equipment, inventory, supplies, anything like that. Ultimately, the rate of increase month over month is significant in terms of the cost of doing business. So I know I've said this the last month and the month before and the month before, but this really is a reminder for any prospect that is seriously interested in your franchise. Now is a time to always be reminding them every day, every month you wait, this inflation is very high and your dollar is worth much less, not kind of less, much less today than it was yesterday. And it's worth much less a month from now than it is today. And so reminding them that these costs will continue to go up, along with the cost of lending is going up as well. So borrowing money, the cost of borrowing money. Now, business loans is, I haven't seen the same increase in lending rates quite as much as I have, for example, in the mortgage rates. But nonetheless, it is going up. It's costing more to borrow money, and it's costing more just to hold your money. So that means if you are intending to spend it, and this is not to bamboozle franchisees. I want to be very clear about that. The goal is not to bamboozle franchisees. The goal is to be communicating realistically to them, to let them know, by the way, if you are serious about doing this, the sooner you get started, the better. It's not some crazy sales pitch. The headlines are telling you inflation is a real thing. This is happening. So just be mindful of that as you're talking to your franchisees. And then on the other side, I don't want to be a fear monger on that either. Also remind them that, will it come down? Yes, but the effects of the inflation, the purchasing power of the candidate's dollar is not going to recover. I don't foresee a situation where inflation goes negative to pick up any of the lost value of your dollar. And so I think when you're talking to your franchisee, prospective franchisees, and even within your own franchise network, if you have older franchisees that are in need of upgrades, improvements, or purchasing new equipment, reminding them that now is the time to be doing that, I think is important. So just some food for thought for you to be discussing and reviewing. And you may even want to run a blog post on your blog, just an idea for you. You may even want to run a blog post or put a little a page in maybe your franchise brochure or in some of your franchise collateral, a little one pager to add it to say something to the effect of, how does inflation impact our franchise system, and talk about it and share that with the franchisee? Or how does that impact opening a franchise in your network, and talk about that. Here's a stat to just point out as well. This is through tradingeconomics.com. Again, this is the U.S. unemployment rate, and it shows that for July, we are at 3.5%. So, a steady decline here since this is the 5-year trend. So you can see all the way back to about 2017. It's hovering just below 4, the big spike from the lockdowns and shutdowns that occurred, and then this decline and this slow and steady kind of recovery over the last 2 years, back down to fairly similar pre-corona unemployment numbers. Labor force, we're still short some labor force participants, but certainly good to see that. I know what I'm hearing just from the broad small business community, from our client base and others I'm speaking with, continues to be finding people, just continues to be a struggle. So when you're talking with prospective franchisees or current franchisees in your network, you may want to be discussing and reviewing how you as the franchisor can be supporting your franchisees with recruiting efforts, one, and then maybe more importantly is retention efforts. So how can you be using this as an opportunity to modernize your recruitment and retaining strategies of employees, to pass this along to your franchisees for some ideas and suggestions for them to implement within their own franchise that they're operating and running. So I think as a franchisor, if you have not done that, if you're in a service business of any kind, home services, professional services, retail, restaurant, whatever you're in, this is on the mind of your franchisees and on your prospective buyers. So if you can go to a prospective franchise candidate and be talking about, by the way, we have this new recruitment program, this is going to be on their mind. How do I find employees? It's always on their mind. But you could say, we understand that this is a problem. Don't run away or shy away from it. We understand this is a problem. However, here's a solution that we're implementing to help combat what's going on with that and help provide a solution to this existing problem. So just some food for thought for you here. Thank you, Keith. Okay, so I guess I understand the chat feature, I guess, is disabled. Okay, so just type it in the Q&A then. Sounds like that. Sorry about that, Keith. One-man band today here. So thanks for putting up with me. Appreciate that. All right, let's talk through the U.S. GDP growth rate. I jumped over to this quickly here, but we can see, the lockdowns here, the huge drop, a record drop, and then a record recovery the quarter following. And then this slow and steady growth, 4.5%, 6%, 6%, 6.7, 2.3, 6.9. And now we have this slowdown of 1.6, 0.9. Inflation's contributing, uncertainty with war and so on. These other factors that cause a little uncertainty. And in my opinion, I think it's just some of this stabilizing, some of this leveling off in the small business community. And I'll have data to back this up, but with my client base, with companies and prospects and the small businesses leaders I'm meeting and talking with, they're very bullish on what's going on. The small business community is thriving from what I've seen. Maybe as a broad with others, all sectors factored together, we're dipping down. To me, I think we're at a mixed, and you'll see as we've seen the data indicating that the GDP is down a little bit. We see some of the other sectors like the manufacturing, it's showing this long-term trend of declining of reducing over the last 12 months. We see services in a fairly, okay, it's in an okay position, not bad, not great either. Hospitals kind of ping-ponging a little bit. So you can see some of these. I think that these indicators are all kind of congruent and running together. One of my favorite stats that I like to show, to jump over here, this is monthly new business startups. This is provided from the U.S. Census Bureau, and this is the number of new business formation statistics. This was released August 11th, so about a week ago. This was just released on what's going on for July 2022. And what I like to point out here is that you can see this drop. Here's where the pandemic and such hit. We saw a dip in new business startup statistics, then a surge, a spike shortly thereafter. It looks like maybe around August or so of 2020, a slight decline down into 2021, and then this big surge back. And we've consistently been over 400,000 new business applications across the country. I mean, you can see this trend before. I mean, we're talking almost a 30-something plus % increase. It was bubbling right around 300,000. Now we're at over 400,000. So we're talking, 100,000 plus increase in new business applications per month, sustained over 2 years. So I think what that, to me, it reinforces what we've been hearing about, this new trend or push of people saying, I want to take control of my own destiny. I want to be my own boss. I want to do something I want to do. I want to do something I want to do for me this time. I want to start my own business finally, or do my own thing. And certainly some of them, a lot of them, the majority are starting independents. But as we see this influx in startups, certainly that's going to also impact franchising. And so we have this new surge of startup mindset that's happening. So this certainly is going to impact the number of candidates in the market, the number of people interested in buying franchises. It's also going to impact if you are a B2B service provider. If you're a B2B service provider, a lot of these companies that started 2 years ago, they're starting to mature. So these could be prospects for you. So as a B2B provider, I would be thinking about how you could be helping your franchise system leverage the number of new startups, because they're going to need services too. Look at this. A year ago, we had 420-some thousand startups. This month was, what was the exact number? 425,000 and change in July. And not all of them are going to make it, but it's consistent with the pattern of the percentage that will. So we just have more of them coming to market. So just be aware of those changes. Okay, now we're at this small business startup sentiment report that comes out every month. And this is from July of 2022. This was released August 3rd. This data, it's the Small Business Startup Sentiment Index that's published by franchiseinsights.com. And what I really want to show is a record that they had, that 61.7% of respondents indicated that they intend to start up their new business within the next 3 months. So that's between now and the end of the year. So we've got the startup sentiment. So what does that mean for you? It means that people, when you're talking to a prospect, whether they're telling you or not, whether they're indicating it or not, chances are that nearly 2 out of every 3 people, prospective buyers you're talking to, have starting up right now within the next 3 months on their mind. So you may, if you do not have a pathway for how that candidate can be starting up within the next 90 days, or maybe you say before the end of the year, next 90 days, if you do not have a roadmap to show them how to do that, you may want to consider that. Here's our 3-month startup plan. Here's our before the end of the year startup plan. Something to that effect for you to be offering to a prospective candidate to be sharing with them. So just some ideas for you to think about. Maybe you could show them how they could do it. Even if you're in a fixed location and you're like, boy, there's no way they could get started in 3 months, but they could buy the franchise, get the loan, and engage with a real estate broker and start looking at some sites in the next 3 months. That's possible. And if you're a home-based business or a service business, it's definitely feasible to start before the end of the year. If you're in education, I know a lot of clients we work with are in education, or maybe it's a seasonal business. Education, you're going through the big phase now. You say you don't want to miss out for the after Christmas break kind of program or after winter break program that they're going to go into for January and February for the next surge leading into summer camps and summer programs, or for other seasonal businesses, maybe an ice cream business or something. You want to be ready for the warm weather that's going to come again. And if you start now, you can be open by maybe Memorial Day and be up and running. So be thinking about these things, because your candidates are. And sometimes I found with franchisors that sometimes you take for granted the information about your business, but your franchise prospects or new franchisees don't know. They don't know. They don't have that information yet. So we need to make sure we're communicating that to them. Here's another statistic I want to talk about. Still consistently, this is the number one factor in terms of what is a prospective budding entrepreneur's biggest factor to starting their business. 66.2% say funding or access to funding is our number one concern and factor. 66.2%. We see that it's dropped. It was up to 75% last month. That's come down to 66.2%. And we see most of that gain happen here in economic climate. So the economic climate last month was down, looks like it was down maybe around 30%, and it popped up to 46.8%. So my assumption and hunch, or I should say my hunch, is that recognizing when the inflationary data came out showed that we were, or excuse me, not inflation, the contraction of the economy, that we're in a recession, probably stoked some fears and concerns. What I find interesting, though, and which is the point that the Small Business Startup Sentiment Index showed, is that despite this concern of the economic climate increase, there's still a record number of people, here it is, looking to open up in the next 3 months. I find that interesting. So to me, what that's saying is that while they may be, these prospective budding entrepreneurs may be concerned about economic conditions, it's still not preventing them from wanting to move forward in the next 3 months. Maybe they see it as an opportunity. I don't know. Maybe it's that extra push that they needed to get it going. Don't really know exactly why. I'm trying to kind of combine these together, see, well, let's try to make some sense of that, what that all looks like. How does COVID-19 affect your interest in business ownership? They've been asking this for a long time, for a couple of years now. 23.7% said no impact. 41% said it boosts their interest in controlling their own destiny. 15.8% said it makes me favor businesses that would be resistant to that kind of thing. 43.9% says it reduces the amount of capital I have to invest. So we see this big spike the last 6 months of the coronavirus concern here. And 10.1% said, I've decided to put my business startup on hold for now. So takeaways from this data and information to me shows that, well, 10% said it puts it on hold. 90% said, well, I'm not putting it on hold. So I think that's a good indicator to say, well, the coronavirus is not driving people away from startup. Rather, we see that it's actually encouraging them to do it, to get started. It's either having no impact, it's making them favor, or it's boosting their interest in starting a business, which is great. But the concern of capital comes back in. So which mirrors this access to funding is the number one concern. So a lot of what we've been talking about today addresses economic climate. It addresses that 46.8% concern. What you need to control as the franchisor is access to funding for your franchisees. So if you don't have a preferred lending partner that you're working with, find one. There are a lot of great vendors in franchising that can help you with it if you don't have one. If you don't have one, find out which banks or organizations have helped recent franchisees get funding. Go talk to them. Ask them if they'd be interested in creating a strategic relationship with you. So there are a lot of great ways you can do it, and I'd be happy to talk with you post show here. If you need some referrals, we have a lot of franchise lenders that we refer out to. So let's go ahead and jump into a couple other stats that franchiseinsights.com published. So this was published August 10th, within about a week and a half ago. I love this statistic. This is so interesting to me, and is counterintuitive when I present this to people who have never heard this. So if you haven't heard this, welcome to this wonderful, interesting statistic and data. And this is now the third sample that's been done. So this was, the blue bar here is July of 2020. The green bar is July of 2021. And the purple, or this kind of magenta fuchsia color, is July of 2022, which was taken last month. And this is asking the franchise prospects, how many franchise concepts are you interested or inquiring about? How many are you contacting? 41.8%. You can see it's been very consistent, right around 42% for over 24 months are inquiring about one concept, one. 16.6% inquired about two. So that means in total, if we add that together, it gets us as 48.5% of all prospects you're talking to, nearly 60%, are only ever talking to two. That's it. Two franchises. So that means out of five, if you have five prospects, that means nearly 3 out of those 5 inquired about 1 or 2 prospects, or inquired about 1 or 2 franchises. I'm sorry, 1 or 2 franchises. And that's significant for you as a marketing or franchise sales professional. That means that literally every lead that's coming in, you're the only game in town, or you're one of 2. You're not one of 100. You're not one of 10. You're not one of 5. Okay, now the other 4 are, or the other, if you had those 5 and 3 of them are looking at 1 or 2, that means that the other 2 are looking at 3 or more. Okay, but the more likely this means you need to come in with the assumption that this prospect is looking at only your brand or maybe one other brand. And by the way, that's been the experience that I've had and that our team has had and other franchise sales professionals I talk with. Most often that candidate is only ever talking to that one franchise brand. So even if you're a new franchisor, brand new, chances are they're talking to just you. So make sure you're remembering that in your marketing, in your contact, and not just fluffing this off as, oh, I'm going to leave another message. Oh, I'm just going to leave another email. Oh, we're just going to send them in the drip campaign and forget about them. Can't look at it that way. Recognize that these are people looking at one brand, maybe 2, and yours is one of them. And it may be the only one. So keep that in mind. I think this is so critical, so critical. And to me, I see too many professionals in our space, franchise professionals that are franchise marketing, franchise sales professional, that are too lackadaisical about this idea, or not aware of it. Here's another data point I like to end. And by the way, I've gone about 5 minutes longer than normal. I'm going to go about 1 or 2 minutes here, and then we're going to call it wrap. So hang with me here. So this is mystery shopping. And what they do is they see how many franchises how many franchises contacted the prospect back when based on the number they inquired. So here's a mystery shopping report. And what they found is that 60% of the franchisors called back. All of them called back. At least half called back, 17.8, less than half, 4.4. And here's what's amazing. Almost 20% of the respondents said none of the franchisors contacted them or reached out to them again. That's amazing to me. So that still means that 20% of franchisors are just maybe not calling back or caught them at a bad time. It also means we're seeing improved contact rates where the survey respondents said 60% called them back. So I find that very interesting. Always room for improvement there. And the final stat that I like to show here is which categories are the most active for franchise lead gen. So which industries in franchising are generating the highest percentage of franchise leads coming through over the last 90 days. And these are the leading categories. Home services is still number one, 17.8%. It's coming down from the low 20s where it was a few months ago, but it's still the number one category. Senior and healthcare, still very high. Business services, high at 14%. Food and restaurant on the comeback, 12.7%. Cleaning and maintenance up to 12.6%. Child-related is growing again, 4.8%. Financial services, 4.3%. Health and fitness, 3.2%. Education is on the rise again, 3.1%. And retail rounds out the top 10 categories at 3%. So that's the general overview for today here. So I'll go ahead and stop sharing, see if we have some questions. Keith, you look pretty active there. So the few who look more than two, a huge proportion of the actual leads. Let's see, 16.6% look at two, 33.2% of the leads. The few who look at more than two generate a huge proportion of the actual leads. I'm not sure I understand. Could you forward that last slide to me? Sure. Yeah. Keith, if you want to take a look at that last slide, you can take a quick look at the site there. I'll forward that over to you. Any other questions that came up? Go ahead and type that into the Q&A. Apparently the chat feature is not working. Not sure why. Maybe a glitch here today. But with any other comments, questions? I know I ran a little long today, folks, so really like to thank you all for tuning in. Thanks for being here today and tuning into this, and hopefully we can generate some, you can use this information and apply it to your business, and it proves to be valuable or useful to you. Again, my name's Tom with Big Sky Franchise Team. So grateful for you to be here, and we'll be back with this message in about a month from now. Have a great weekend, everyone.